my sister was dating our friend from junior high school, and then she started dating this kid, and so he joined the Marines.
I'll never forget the conversation I got from Christian's mom once upon a time. She goes, why would you convince my boy to join the military? And I was like, whoa, easy now. I'm just doing what I have to do here.
It shows you who you are and what you're doing, and it allows you to look at it without a point of judgment. So you're not looking down on yourself. It's like looking at a friend. You're looking at yourself in that same regard. So for me, those are some of the most effective therapies that I've done.
There's a young generation of studs who are coming that I'm very proud of and excited that were raised off of things like Rocco and David Goggins, and you know what I mean? And so that young generation is coming, man, and they're coming with the fire, bro, because they were raised in the self-help organization or self-help era.
The pendulum always swings extreme on either side before it reaches equilibrium.
Welcome to the VinnyRoc Podcast.
I took the blows and did it my way.
It's time. The VinnyRoc Podcast.
What's up, y'all? So first of all, this podcast is not like very organized or anything fancy. It's just me talking to people who I invite on the show. The VinnyRoc Podcast has gone through all kinds of different kind of, I guess, styles. But in the end, right now, just where my life is at, I focus a lot on mental health and wellness and kind of veterans because in law enforcement, because that's just the space that I realized that's just what I do, what I know. Mm-hmm. I met you guys from the Medevac Podcast, and that was an awesome podcast, and I appreciate you guys inviting me to that. And, I think today I wanted to go over a few things. The Terra Arma, the Ascend Together is also the nonprofit, and pretty much some of your backgrounds, which I didn't know, David. We have some, we've crossed paths in a way. And so pretty excited about it. And Christian, I want to know more about you. So let's do it, man. First, let me put this to the side. First, I want to kind of hear the story of when you guys coming together. How did that work out?
Yeah, that goes back almost 20 years at this point, right, Christian? So Christian and I linked up. We went to high school in California together.
Really?
Yeah. Met in 2004.
Yeah. 2004, 2005.
And I'll let Christian explain this, but he had long hair down to his back.
Yeah.
Skater ready to crush it all the time. So we always got into a little bit of the daredevil activities. I think we really got close after we started doing some bridge jumping, 60-foot bridges off of Tracy, California drawbridge.
Yeah.
Dude, so you guys are friends from way back.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Where was that at? Where did you guys grow up?
That was Tracy, California. So if you're familiar with Stockton, Modesto area.
Yeah, got it.
Central California, about an hour and a half south of Sacramento and just east of San Jose.
Yeah, that's funny. I know it because I at one point I spent some time in Chico, California, and I just drove from LA up, so you see the sign.
Yeah, you probably drove right through it.
Yeah, it was an interesting town. It was called Cowtown. We just nothing but almonds and dairy milk out there, right, Christian?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, it's a little bit more Texas than Texas in some parts.
It is.
Well, David, I'm sorry, but during the podcast, I know that you were an Army Ranger, correct?
Yes.
And Christian, I never really picked it up, but you're in the military of some sort. Was it Marines?
I was in the Air Force, yeah.
In the Air Force, got
it. Close.
Very close. I heard the basic training is exactly the same.
Yeah, it's just as hard. Yeah, I did combat search and rescue in the Air Force for about 13 years.
Really?
Yeah. So I wasn't a PJ. I was a special missions aviator. Everyone hears combat rescue and they're like, oh, you're a PJ, but they don't really know what it means. It's similar. So it's part of the rescue triad. So we have helicopters, airplanes, and PJs. and I was assigned more to the helicopter side. So I spent a majority of my career flying in helicopters, shooting guns out of them, doing, picking up people who are having the worst day of their lives usually.
Yeah, that's pretty rad. Did you guys kind of do the whole thing where you guys joined around the same time, or was it just by coincidence your lives kind of joined the military?
Yeah, so Dave actually joined a year before I did. So he was a year ahead of me in high school. So he and another buddy of ours, Adam, they joined the Army together, and I was a year behind. And so I joined a little bit later, but I'll let Dave kind of fill you in on his career.
Yeah, no. So we in 2000. So I enlisted 2007 to the Future Soldier program. So before I even graduated high school, I knew that's what I wanted to do. Always, when I was a kid, I was playing Army Man in the back and building up fake battlefields, and always pretended to be the hero that I didn't quite understand. So I enlisted. I wanted to be a pilot first. So Air Force was the route that I wanted to go. I joined what's called Civil Air Patrol, and it's pretty much a junior ROTC kind of program.
Yeah,
where it's a little bit more involved, and you support in weird stuff like rescues and stuff like that. They'll bring you out to kind of police the line and see if there's anything there. And then I realized that it takes 10 years to get behind a cockpit. And I was impatient. I was young at the time. And I said, let me do something where I could kick people in the teeth right away. So I decided to join the Rangers and enlisted with that contract. And funny enough, I think Christian, you joined in what year?
2010, yeah.
So you joined. So I actually called him up after I was injured on my third deployment before you left, right?
Yeah, it was just before I left for basic training. Yeah,
so just to put the terror in him,
Yeah, that's funny. Similar thing happened to me. My sister was dating our friend from junior high school, and then she started dating this kid after we graduated high school and everything. They just kind of reconnected, and so he joined the Marines, and he's been doing the Marine thing, and he's deployed, and they have a really good relationship. And he ends up getting blown up 2 days before I'm going to freaking Afghanistan for the first time. And my dad calls me and goes, hey, I don't want to scare you, but Raymond's in the hospital. I'm like, fuck, you guys should have just told me this later. Like, let me go overseas first. Jesus.
Wait a minute for it. Yeah, and I'll never forget the conversation I got from Christian's mom once upon a time. She calls me up and she goes, why would you convince my boy to join the military? And I was like, whoa, easy now. I'm just doing what I have to do here.
It's funny how people disconnected from the military think that every job is like as dangerous as the jobs that we picked, right? We picked jobs we knew that were probably going to be something. But I get like my sister-in-law did it to me once. She goes, don't tell my boys about the military. I'm like, there's some really good jobs in the military. Like if I could do it all over again, I might do those instead, right? But everyone thinks like every single job, even in the Army, there's a MOS called 42 Alpha, which is just a paper pusher, right? It's just a secretary essentially. And it's like they're not going to see combat, right? They're not the one they make the movies of. I promise you.
That's
perishable skills.
Yeah, a common misconception that I like to clarify for a lot of people. And nowadays, when anyone comes up to me and asks the question, what branch should I join, my kid, whatever it is, I always say Air Force because, there's a lot of trade skills that you can get within that, unless you have something very specific in mind. But most jobs are supporting those elements, right? So there is a lot of things to do out there where you do not have to be combat oriented, and you can invest 4 years of your time to get a trade skill, everything paid for, have college taken care of, even your master's program by the time you get out.
Yeah, I agree. There's so many benefits to it. Just people are too scared. I'm trying to get all my kids. Not one kid. Not one. I have 8. Not one wants anything to do with it. The babies, maybe. Maybe I can convince them. I'll do a psyop on their asses.
Yeah, that's kind of the point, too. I think about looking at it from the perspective of, yes, it's great to pass it down on a career aspect of things, too. But sometimes we make those choices so that the future generations don't necessarily have to be there.
Mm-hmm.
That was my initial choice to join. Was my daughter was already 1 year old by the time I joined. Actually, she turned 1 up while I was in basic training. And I was like, man, this war is happening. This war is popping off. Mm-hmm. And you might as well serve now, or else it's going to be my daughter fighting this war. You know what I mean? And dude, because how long that damn thing lasted, there was a really good chance if she wanted to, she could have joined during the same war that I did. You know what I mean? Like, that's how crazy.
20 years.
Yeah.
20 years of that for sure. And unfortunately, it didn't end the way any of us thought it was going to end as well. So that's a balance that takes experience to learn from, right? What battles are you facing for? And two, like the last few years, we've been struggling with being able to believe in our leadership. And I think that's a huge part of it as well, is why we see recruitment and retention at an all-time low. It's because morale wasn't there, and we had a horrendous exit that left this country with a 57% national average for suicide, above the national average, I should say. So, like, what are the pros versus the cons at the end of the day?
Yeah, and I think we don't have enough advocates for the military. Like, I tell people, if you grew up in the LA area where I did, there were some areas that were poverty. Right. Friends of mine that are probably still in poverty because they never thought outside the box. Right. They just kind of stayed into the kind of the social norm of it all. But if you wanted to change your stars, if you wanted to change the generational gap, join the military.
Absolutely.
And people don't get that. Like, and people go, oh yeah, but they're always trying to recruit blacks and browns. I'm like, well, some of those communities need it. They need some kind of answer to this struggle, this cyclic, this cycle that kind of keeps them into it. And that's, I highly recommend the military to people. Now, the government's a little scary, right? Like that's a little scary. Yes, I agree with that too. I'm not fucking fond of this shit either. Mm-hmm. But I would definitely tell, if my son said, I want to join today, I'd say, all right, man, let's look at the jobs. And I'd find something that was so far from what the government can fucking destroy. As in, it would be like a respiratory therapist, you know what I mean? Or something like, bro, there is value there and no war's going to fuck with this. You know what I mean? That's what I would kind of recommend, because at least you gain ground on life, and this disposition that you might have been born into that is unfortunate, you can change it with one fucking contract. And that's why I find value in this. I think people see it for the negative of that. I see it for the positive, like, you want a fucking chance? Join, but do it right. Like, do it in a way where, like, then not even the government's choices in war will change the outcome of your career field.
And social classes, right? I mean, that's how I look at it too. Is I was raised very, very poor in a trailer park, and like it gave me the tools I need to kind of skip that, set myself up for success, and work in a different playing field at the end of the day.
Yeah, it helps you get that escape velocity a little bit. And even if you don't think you're going to like it, how many guys do you know that? I'm sure you know quite a few through the Army who have the option for jail or the military. They chose the military. And even within, you can look at those guys a year and a half in. By that time, they're done being angry and they're engaged. They're involved. They're working in their career fields. Like it doesn't matter if you don't want to do it right away. If it doesn't look glamorous or glorious, it's going to change your life. And it's just a couple of short years at the very least too.
Yeah, you know what it did for me is it showed me that I can be successful in something else that I never expected. Like, oh, I'm actually decent at this. That feels good to know I'm not a complete fuck up. You know what I mean? That's what it helped me do.
Not a complete shitbag.
I know I suck at a lot of things, but this one I'm not so bad at, which feels good.
Yeah, it does, and it's like I said, it sets you up for some failure. Gives you a couple tools that you never even thought you'd be exposed to at the end of the day. So, we call that, on the CBT side of things, exposure therapy, right? Is just being able to be open to other things that you weren't necessarily exposed to at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, tell me about, what was the reason why you guys decided to create this Medevac podcast?
Yes.
And the name, it has to do with both your backgrounds, right? It has to be, right? You've been obviously on a Medevac, David.
Yeah.
Chris, you pretty much did Medevacing, right?
I was on both sides of it, right? My first deployment when I went into Iraq was combat search and rescue. I had 2 PJs and 3 Rangers, including myself. So we had our own dedicated bird to that, and we would just fly around and do that. So, I always tell Christian and anyone I talk to, it was one of my favorite parts, and not an average duty assignment for a Ranger as well.
Yeah, no, not at all. It was a CSAR, right? CSAR team?
Yeah, CSAR team. So I did that. So I was exposed to that for a long time. And then I was obviously injured in Afghanistan in 2010. And that's when I got picked up on that side of things. So I've definitely been through kind of the 360 view of it.
Yeah. And then I spent my entire career, picking people up in that same position. So whether it's combat deployments, stateside activations for natural disasters, hurricanes, floods, wildfires, I've kind of done rescue all over the world, pretty much any condition you can imagine. So it gives, both Dave and I an opportunity to discuss both sides of the story.
Yeah.
We've both, I've not been on the injured side nor been medevac myself, but I've been the person to do that for a lot of other people. And he's been on that side. So it gives us unique perspectives, especially when we're talking to our guests.
Yeah.
We don't, if you listen to the Medevac podcast, we rarely talk about ourselves. We rarely incorporate our own experiences. It's more of an interview style for the guest, but it is pertinent information. We're talking to them, we're talking to injured folks about what's it like to lose a leg? What's it like to lose both of your legs, to be a burn survivor, to be a quadriplegic? How does your life change? What are the lessons that you've learned along the way? What's some resilience you can impart on people who might endure the same thing, or, they might pull lessons from what you've learned along the way?
Yeah.
So that got started. So Christian ends up, he's stationed obviously in California. He gets out and was like, okay, what am I doing now? I said, you're dropping everything and you're moving to Texas. Let's do this. We talked for years. I always said to Christian, I was like, you're much too smart for the Air Force, which you got to be smart to be in the Air Force, right? So, he decided to move down to Texas, where I was living at. And we sat in my office right here and we were like, hey, we've always been interested in these podcasts. They were like really up and coming, and we just went back and forth on what this looked like. I think at one iteration I suggested the Purple Heart podcast, and I was like, that is lame as hell. Let's not do that. So, we sat down, we ideated, we whiteboarded out what this looks like, and we came to the conclusion that how cool would it be if you put the rescuee and the rescuer together, because they don't have the opportunity to reconnect after that. Like most of the time, it's like, who is that guy? Same with me. Anyone who medevaced me, I have no idea who it was. So what we wanted to do was connect the dots a little bit and start sharing the whole side of the story, right? From the rescue piece to the rescuee piece. And then it just kind of morphed into this show where we talked about just interesting stories of rescue, recovery, resiliency. And then we kind of even pivoted more and went into continued service to try to showcase organizations that have outstanding resources for veterans and first responders. So it just became this show where it's deeper than a podcast. We talk to every single one of our guests still. They still reach out to us and say, hey, I'm having financial hardship or I need a mobility device. And we go to our nonprofit organizations and we start helping them out with whatever they need. So it just became this like kind of beautiful thing where it's our way to continue to serve.
Yeah. Dude, I love that, man. I mean, podcasting is where it's at right now. Like I do podcasting. I've been doing it for many years, but I have several podcasts because it's just a form of information that I think just is you can kind of collect it anywhere, whether it's in the gym or a long drive or whatever. It's one of those really awesome ways of just receiving information, hearing cool stories.
Yeah, and it's the best therapy at the end of the day too. I say this podcast is much for our guests as it is for us. We have 160 interviews for Medevac alone, and it like helps us talk through things and actually sit down and have a conversation with somebody for over an hour. And we talk about them, we talk about us. How often do we get to do that nowadays?
I'm saying it's something we don't do these days ever. Most of my best friends is via text, and I have to force myself to actually.
But Christian and I both do a lot of speaking. We're up front in a lot of people. I've gotten the opportunity to travel the world to speak on military bases and installations across. I was just in the Baltics a couple months ago, and Poland. And when you sit down and interview people, that becomes easier. So it strengthens skills on so many different aspects of things as well, even like language, your ability to articulate what you're talking about and then focus on those people's stories and help them out. So sometimes I'll say things to other people and realize, hey man, maybe I should listen to that piece of advice too. How often does that happen for you?
Take my own advice. Yeah.
Yeah, I love inviting a lot smarter people on my podcast to learn from. It's like, this is my hour to ask all the questions I want and just kind of dig. You know what I mean? And I had a kid on who was 18 years old, and I learned so much from the 18-year-old brain, the modern 18-year-old brain, that I was like, man, life is so different for you at 18 compared to when I was 18, which is now however many years ago.
Yeah.
And so it's just fascinating. And it's really cool also to see some of these young kids that I've interviewed. I've been letting some young kids come to my podcast and ask me questions almost like as if I'm the mentor.
Sure.
And then I learned so much from them that I'm like, well, it's nice to know that there's young kids who are still motivated out there. Like, cause you know, you don't know what you see but there's a young generation of studs who are coming that I'm very proud of and excited that were raised off of things like Jocko and David Goggins. And, you know what I mean? And so that young generation is coming, man. And they're coming with a fire, bro, because they were raised in the self-help organization or self-help era. And they just have nothing but a wealth of information hitting them. And so it's exciting and fucking like those guys are coming to kick our asses, which is dope, man.
And it breaks the stigma a little bit, I think.
It does.
I think that like what we hear in media and on the news or what you read about is not what the average person is really thinking, at the end of the day. So you get to sit down with people and you hear these horror stories on the news and stuff, but most people, they're not thinking in that way. It's mostly aligned on everything. And two, that part of the younger generation, and we have this battle, this camaraderie, if you will, on every generation across the board. Oh, it was harder when I was born. No, there's just different problems. It's a different environment, the things to navigate now. We didn't have to deal with that in the 90s. Everybody's outside playing. Now we have isolation in a different way, more access at our fingertips, but we're not doing this face-to-face anymore.
Yeah. Different problems. I think I'm hopeful for them. They've been raised in an information era where they have access to unlimited information. We didn't have that. We didn't have it at all, especially if you're pushing it relative to the military. Like when you joined, was there a pre-ranger handbook? Like this is how you're gonna? No, didn't exist. Now there's 100 on Amazon.
You had to go to the library and ask.
Yeah, I was in basic training learning from a dude who had a friend they went through it. And he's like, bro, my buddy said this. And we're like doing all kinds of shit that's irrelevant, right? Like, you learn through just like the it's the whole telephone game. It's probably shit information as well.
Yeah, it very well could be. But they have access to so much information now. And I'm happy to see that. And I've, just getting back from the holidays, I spent some time in California with my family and some old friends. They've got kids who are in middle school and high school. And, I don't have kids, so I was talking to my buddies about, I hear it's pretty difficult having kids right now. Like they're playing the woke game at school and this, that, and the other. And they're like, no, the kids are not putting up with it. Like the kids are.
I was gonna say, like, in my house, my house, it's different. I raised him, right? And my boy comes home like, that kid's an idiot. And I'm like, like it really comes down to the household and who's raising them and what kind of information you're putting into their heads. As in my family, they're raised by a drill sergeant, right? Who is like dad drill sergeant. They're raised by the very patriotic person, but also I explain everything to them. So I see my kids in a good spot, but I have a 22-year-old who had resentment towards me as a single father for a long time. And we battled, dude. She went to Ohio State. She's very liberal leaning in all her views. And so we fight all that. I wouldn't say fight. We have very heated discussions because she wants to be a lawyer and she fucking thinks she is right now, right? I've had her on the podcast. She's fucking great. But the point is, like, that was an interesting one for me to see, like, oh man, I raised this girl, but it doesn't matter. She's receiving information. She gets to curate the information she receives, right? And so that's the funny thing about all the information. You have to curate an environment that's teaching you either to be like proactivism, in self-help and get shit done, or you could be on the other side and curate a space where it makes you a victim. And I'm very nervous about that because like I want my kids to be more on the side of like get things done and don't victimize themselves. Yeah. But it really depends on how you curate your own social media and what you choose to take in.
For sure. I like that approach. And I think it's actually relative to, I might get a little heat for it, but I think it's relative to a lot of veterans, to be honest.
Absolutely.
I think we get heat for that sometimes, telling people to take responsibility for themselves and to be their own advocate. But I think you're right. It's your job to learn. It's your job to parse the information and believe what you want. I think as a dad, that's your job is probably just to be supportive of your kid, regardless of the decisions. But from the vet side, there's a lot of guys who, like, we still hear continually complaining about the VA and having access to stuff like that. When really at the end of the day, like, I can make an appointment today at the VA. Yeah. It's not that difficult for the most part.
I agree.
You know how to advocate for yourself, and you're doing it.
I love that segue because it is true. As much as our kids have the freedom of curating their own information, so do the veterans. And you can easily fall into following the same group of, early on back in social media, it was disgruntled veterans, right? This group called the disgruntled. And cool. I don't know what they do nowadays. I stopped following them many, many years ago. But when that first came out, I'm like, yeah, that's not the group of idea. That's not the mindset I want to follow, right?
Yeah.
And I've heard they've done some good stuff. It doesn't matter. The veteran community can be a very toxic space to be in. Even as ourselves, who we're veterans, who our audience is more veterans, and that kind of world, it's the community itself can eat its own really, really bad.
It's the victim mentality.
Yeah, it becomes a thing where what I believe it is? I think civilians were really empathetic towards our mental health, that they did way too much for us for way too fucking long. And I think veterans now are like, hey, when are you going to get me my free this or my that? Why aren't you taking care of me? And we stopped being, let me go get shit done. Let me wake up, put my shoes on, put my pants on, and get it done. And so people weren't self-sufficient enough for so long. And then it's just it's a tough space, dude. I'll let you hear. Go ahead, David.
It is tough because the pendulum always swings extreme on either side before it reaches equilibrium.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, let's look at Vietnam, right, where there was no access to any sort of mental health, and we didn't have clear definitions of what that looked like. But since how horribly they were treated, since how generations of lives were ruined because of it, we were able to make a balance and really push a kick into finding and funding all of these projects to find out what post-traumatic stress is. TBI is a relatively new term, right? We've all known it, right? There's microconcussions, all this data that's come out, but we've really identified the fact that we need to help fix the brain before we could fix those symptoms of post-traumatic stress. So at the end of the day, yes, like, there is a victim mentality and it needed to be half so extreme, but now that pendulum is swinging so hard on the other side, we need to find a balance for it too. Okay, take action, take ownership of what that looks like. And, what we've always learned as mentors, soldiers, whatever level you're at too, look, you're listening to those above you, but you're also mentoring those below you as well. And that's the best access to that. So when you just say that you're a victim, I'm just trying to get the free trips, I'm just trying to get the free dog, I'm trying to do these things, and you're not bettering those that are, following in your footsteps, then we have an inaction happening. And that's where we need to start really coming to and saying, let's take ownership for this.
Yeah. I have a 15-year-old daughter who complains all day. And I always think about it because she goes, Dad, my knee hurts. I go, did you ice it? No. I'm like, well, then stop complaining. And it's the same thing as, like, are you taking any action towards improving your life? I have veterans all the time. So I work obviously in the mental health space. I work a lot with these veterans. They call me a lot and they always give me their complaints. And I'm always like, do you not hear yourself? Because you're not doing anything good. Almost everyone who calls, like, in a bad, I'm like, are you drinking? They're like, yes. I'm like, okay, well, let's just stop that already, because we know that escalates everything. It's a crazy time, man. And, the frustration is 20-something years and no change in statistics, almost worse at times. And that is like, well, all these nonprofits are doing what to help? Are we distracting with camping? Are we distracting? Are we actually, like you said earlier, are we healing the TBI before we actually try and do anything else, right? Are we fixing these root problems? I'd love to talk about your nonprofit.
Yeah. So, well, with that said, I think that, a good segue into that would be that we have a tendency to be very competitive in the civilian world. That's something I realized, coming out of the military is we don't look at collaborative efforts. Even if you're in the same playing space, you should be working together. at the end of the day. I think the military community is very good at doing that and saying, this person is not competition for me, especially in an internal organization, right? I'm going to step on this man so that I can advance my career. And the military is a little bit different. We're like, we want you to be successful, and we're going to bring you to that level and give you the tools you need to survive here. So I think that there's a lot of, there's not enough communication between departments and understanding, hey, you might be PTSD, I might be a TBI clinic, and, I might be psychedelic therapies. Why aren't we communicating? Because all of these have great data points here, but everybody's so siloed. Yeah. So I think that's a huge problem. That's what we need to look at from our holistic approach. And that's what Christian and I do. So, we're with the Robert Irvine Foundation. I've been there for 10 years. Our podcast is powered by them as well. And we have a business called Terra Arma. And what we do is we sit down and we say, hey, we have, under Robert Irvine's, he's got 13 companies there. How do each of them, even though they might be a different product or a different space, how do we communicate with them and start advancing everybody so it's a win-win-win scenario as opposed to win-lose or just one of those things too. So we take a very holistic approach to everything we do. Include the podcast is a great example of that, right? It's not just about having a conversation. It's about like, okay, I learned this from you. What does that look like? Also, here's some resources that might help you there. Oh, a guy in the GovCon space. So we have these ever changing and evolving conversations throughout the year. And we always say in the foundation is you're a part of the family now. We're not here to just help you out once. You give us a call if you need anything.
Yeah, it's crazy how the community can sometimes be so fearful of like scarcity, like there's not enough. Like I think there's so much space for all of us, and each nonprofit has their own space. And I agree with you. We try and work with as many who are in the same space to kind of, it's almost like a force multiplier. You know what I mean? Like, let's work together on this. You take that wing, I take this wing, and we all work together. And so I really love that. And what do you guys really try and focus on the most with your organization?
So through the Robert Irvine Foundation, so it might have to back up just a little bit and explain. We might have to dive into Terra Arma first so we can explain the giving program piece of it. So we do, we work very closely. We're partnered with the Robert Irvine Foundation. Yes. But Terra Arma also has a giving program. And Terra Arma, since we haven't really covered that yet, it's the outdoor clothing company that David and I own. We founded it in 2021 together, and it's made great strides. So primarily what we do is we create base layers, mid layers, outer layers for the military. So everything we make is 100% sourced and made in the USA. It's actually manufactured by blind and visually impaired people here in San Antonio, which is a pretty unique selling proposition, and it's a unique piece of our giving program. So that's why I want to build some background and a little bit of picture about Terra Arma, because it's not just we make money and we donate money. We are like fully comprehensive 360-degree giving at all points. It's something Dave and I, when we sat down and we started pressing the business forward and the podcast forward, is wanted to make sure that we're giving, at all points that we possibly can. We want to enable as many people as we possibly can. And so we do that in a multitude of ways. So through our manufacturing operations, where we manufacture here in the States, all the proceeds that go, the manufacturing proceeds that they make go towards services, they go towards transportation, they go towards housing, education, medical opportunities for these blind and visually impaired people here in San Antonio. So it supports them, it helps. What's that?
And at the very least, employment, right? I mean, every project we bring on hires more individuals who are visually impaired.
Yeah. And so it allows them to regain some independence in their lives too. So if you're a blind or visually impaired person, like getting to the grocery store by yourself is almost impossible. You need a dog, or you need another person to take you to the bus stop, to ride on the bus there, help you get your groceries, etc. And that looks like that for 100% of your day for the most part. This system, picks them up. The bus picks them up right at their house every single morning, drops them off at the front door to work. They can walk in by themselves, get to their stations by themselves, work all day, have lunch together. It builds a community and it provides them with a lot of opportunities. So that's just like what we're manufacturing. On the back end, we also have what's called our Ascend Together initiative. And so this is where Terra Arma supports military, veteran, and outdoor nonprofits, primarily in the military and veteran space. but we are expanding. So what that looks like is a multi-tiered system. So we offer some very unique things. For instance, at-cost clothing. So for any military veteran or outdoor nonprofit, we offer them what's at-cost clothing. So what it costs us to produce is what we sell it to them for. And we offer fully customized options, custom branding solutions, whatever it is. If you want something really cool for your nonprofit, we'll make it for them. And what that does, it obviously drives the cost way down. It gives them something that's sourced and made in the USA, a much higher quality product that's going to benefit the long term. I mean, how many bullshit T-shirts have you been handed from a nonprofit? It's the worst quality shirt you've ever been handed. You're like, I'm not going to wear this. So then you have a nonprofit who's wasting their marketing budget. This is going to provide a product that people will actually want to wear. It's going to put their marketing to good use. It enables us, it enables them, so it's a win-win-win. We also offer free media services or deeply discounted media services for these nonprofits. So we do everything from headshots and still photos to full-fledged documentaries. We've actually shot a couple of 20, 30-minute long documentaries specifically for these nonprofits. I think we've done everything to date free of charge, almost entirely. So we have thousands of dollars in equipment, and we put a ton of energy and effort, full-scale editing, to present them something that will benefit them in the long term. Now, what does that give us? Well, it gives us access to the nonprofits, and it gives us it showcases our media as well. So it doesn't necessarily support us all the way, but we're more inclined to give than we are to take. Dave and I have kind of a saying, taking a smaller slice of a fatter pie, right? It's kind of like rising tides, raise all ships. But
yeah.
A lot of people look at these things through competition and how they can get what they want out of it. And for us, it doesn't make sense. It's about coming together. It's about building, long-term legacy, relationships or legacy businesses that can thrive forever and that are doing the right thing at the end of the day. That's really, our number one core value at Terra Arma has always been integrity. We stole some core values from the military. We adopted them rather, but we try to apply that, and I think it's real. We really try to have integrity at all points in our business and try to do the right thing, always. So that's something we've really tried to apply, and I think we've done a good job at it.
Dude, that is fucking incredible. Like, that's extremely awesome to hear. I've never heard anything like that in the business space. I don't think anyone who does that, and there's tons of multi-million-dollar companies right now that out there that I can think of, that I don't think anyone does anything like this. So that's cool. I had no idea. When you guys interviewed me for your podcast, I didn't know all this was, the gift that I could have unwrapped in front of me. I had no idea, but I'm blown away by that.
Well, thank you. Yeah. We appreciate that.
It's been a good journey. It's a slower build to do it with the proper fundamentals and to have good intentions behind it. But it builds something that everybody's proud of. I always tell people it's not just an apparel company. What we're doing is we're trying to better the world. And we could do that one shirt at a time, or we could do that by even filming. I mean, the productions that we have are outstanding. And it's given us access to be able to, a simple trade to help with an impact video and showcase a mission might give us access to help other veterans who get access to their programs, right? So that's been a big piece to showcase that and really just bridge the gap on being good human beings, right?
We need more of that, man. I want to talk to you more about that down the road, about the video stuff, because that's obviously the world that I'm in. And so I think it's really interesting and fascinating. It's the hardest thing for me, like in my position, is wanting to tell these stories that I think should be, told in the biggest scale, is getting Hollywood to fund it, right? Because it's not cheap to do a full production in a large scale, and like just the story of Benavidez, right? Roy Benavidez, I think should be told. And I know someone who has a life right now. It's just not moving, right? Whether they're not getting the funding or whatever. And it's crazy, because that means the world doesn't get to know his name and what he's accomplished, and such an incredible thing. But there's many other stories out there that I think we deserve to be told. It's just how expensive it is to create. And it's why I went into the media side of things, and I think it's important to tell. So I think it's fascinating, man. something I think about with you two is, you guys do so much for veterans and stuff. How about you guys? Have you guys had your own personal struggles that you've gone through? And what are some of the things you've done to try and, I guess, normalize your life, if I can use a word that would make sense?
Yeah, definitely lots of struggles on my end. I always kind of tell the story that, our military service members have a tendency to put so much of their purpose and identity into what they've done for the military. So when you get injured or life comes at you unexpectedly, that sense of purpose is under question, right? So for me, right, waking up in the hospital with the missing leg, other one hanging off, broken back, and several other injuries, I definitely had that question of what am I going to do now? I can't even stand up without passing out. So I went from this special operations warfighter to someone who just couldn't even do a lap around the hospital room and can lift weights, do any of the things that I was doing before. So I struggled with it, but the way I kind of got around it was there was so much to do on the recovery aspect. It's impossible to think big picture. It really is. And big picture kills people on overcoming challenges that they're immediately facing, because when you look at it in an overarching position, it's so incredibly overwhelming. And I look at it now, and I took it literally day by day, hour by hour, minute by minute if I had to. And then all of a sudden you look back and you're like, wow, I did that. So having a tendency to step back and set small goals for yourself can help you overcome that. But absolutely, I struggled. I've been through moments where, I would just break down crying. I had a horrible experience in IKEA. If anyone's been to an IKEA before, there's no windows. They started doing arrows on the floor, which is really cool. But, I got to a point, I'm just sitting there on crutches, just refusing to be in the chair. And I just look out, and this overwhelming sense of impending doom just comes over me. So yeah, I definitely struggled, but the biggest thing that helped me was helping those that were in similar situations. I recognized that really early when I was in the hospital. It wasn't, the admirals or the generals or, senior enlisted that would come in. It was the guy who was coming in with him that was 3 months ahead of me on missing, going through his prosthetic development. Those guys. So then, I was like, I am going to go get in front of as many people as possible to tell my story. And at first, it was so difficult to do, and now it's to the point where I have to remind myself that I might have told this story 1,000 times in the last 1,000 days, but at the end of the day, this is their first time hearing it. So I've taken the power away from my story, and we call this exposure therapy, right? The more I talk about it, the more that I'm open to it and receiving, the less power it's going to have over me. And I was able to chip away for that through many years. And the most healing moments for me was giving back.
Yeah.
There is a balance to it as well, right? Because, we've always all heard the story of the tree who keeps on giving, right? And it's really easy to notice that you've given so much and not be taken care of at the end of the day too. So there is a balance between that, because I struggled about 5 years ago as well, where I was like, I feel like I'm giving everything, but no one's helping me. So making sure that you're taking care of yourself at the end of the day, right? The oxygen mask theory, Christian says this all the time, put your own oxygen on before assisting the other passengers.
Yeah.
And
Christian, how about you?
Oh yeah. To echo Dave's sentiment, I completely agree with everything that he said. Exposure therapy is by and far one of the best things that you can do, continually talking about the things that you're dealing with, talking about it with trusted people, somebody who's made it through, somebody who's endured the same things. It's just as important, to focus on those pieces. But he's also right, not to continually give of yourself to where you're not fully charged and you're able to support your own life. I think there's a lot of opportunity out there for people to dabble and to start giving back little by little to where they can start to understand, what's working for them, what's working for others. But, it's also important to take care of yourself and to focus on the personal side of the therapies. So I wasn't ever combat injured or anything like that. I've had a couple of head traumas when I was in the Air Force. Between skydiving, I was a pro skydiver for a while. I had one head trauma there, and then a couple in deployed locations, and then a shit ton of exposure to probably millions of rounds of 50 cal being fired right next to my face. So micro concussions and TBI that's the stuff I ended up dealing with, and that's a big reason why I got out of the military. Was I was dealing with a lot of issues, mental health issues that were diagnosed quickly as PTSD. And I was sitting there talking to the doc, like, I'm not really affected by the things that I did or the things that I saw. I saw terrible, terrible things, and I did more things, but it didn't really bother me. So I was kind of left questioning, like, why am I being diagnosed with this when I have the symptoms, but nothing that they're offering is fixing me? So that's when I started to account for myself and advocate for myself. And I realized after about a year of investigation and working with doctors that my issues were TBI related, so traumatic brain injury. And some of the biggest things that helped me, CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, to understand my emotions, right? At the very beginning, I was in a place where I had all these crazy emotions, depression and anxiety, and I was angry, or I was quick to anger all the time. And I didn't understand them. I couldn't even look at an emotion chart and be like, this is what I'm feeling today. It's just, I feel bad. The bad's not an emotion, right? Good is not an emotion. So understanding that, learning, like I said, advocating for myself and learning early on how to identify the emotions. And then that's what helped me realize, I don't have PTSD. This is traumatic brain injury, where oftentimes the symptoms overlap. So I started to address that. And the single most effective method for me, and Dave will probably attest to this as well, is psychedelic therapies. Have been the absolute best, the best medicine that I've been able to find. And we heavily advocate for psychedelic medicine in the appropriate manner. And I like to stress that, in the appropriate manner. We do not advocate for going out and buying stuff off the street and just trying to
party drug.
No way. That's not what we advocate for. We advocate for proper retreats that are vetted, that have had that are overseen by MDs or DOs, things that are at least slightly adjudicated and slightly legal. There are places within the U.S. that are totally legal. There's places in Mexico that operate totally legally, and Dave and I have been lucky enough to attend a few different versions of those. On behalf of the podcast, since one of our main topics of discussion is mental health, we talk about the strategies and the therapies that we've utilized, and we talk about it openly. This is how it's made it better for me, right? So we went down and we did Ibogaine with vets. We did the 5-MeO.
I want to do that one.
Yeah. It's a lot, dude. It's a big one.
Yeah, I've read a lot on it, but that's one I want to do.
Yeah, and if it's something you think you need, then absolutely. I think it's absolutely worthwhile. Whether you're getting a mystical experience, or you're getting something that's going to help you work through the issues that you're dealing with. At the end of the day, it is going to provide a positive benefit no matter what. Obviously, it's got things like neurogenesis, where it's going to help create new neurons and help build those broken neural pathways that we're dealing with from TBI or repeated stress exposure, things like that. It's going to allow you to take a breath and take a moment and be introspective with, this is who I really am. These are the things that I'm doing that are affecting my life negatively. It'll show you that with a very, very clear view. It shows you who you are and what you're doing, and it allows you to look at it without a point of judgment. So you're not looking down on yourself. You're just looking. It's like looking at a friend. You're looking at yourself in that same regard. So for me, those are some of the most effective therapies that I've done. And again, I stress that it's important to do CBT first, understand your emotions, understand how to utilize the tools, and then use the psychedelics in a therapeutic manner, in a therapeutic setting to help benefit the issues that you're dealing with. But for me, that's been the biggest thing by and far.
Yeah. I just wrapped up my master's in psychology, and half my papers are on PTSD. The other half are on psychedelic therapy because everyone picks what they want to study, and so I'm studying those two areas because, the psychedelics assisted therapy has been very valuable to a lot of guys I know. It's something I've researched a ton. I've worked with several organizations. Heroic Hearts is one of them that I've worked with. But tons of them, and seeing the value in it. And a lot of people who question it, right? And so I wanted to try and get deeper into that, understand it more, also to help hopefully advocate it in the future as I maybe one day partake in it as my own experiments, not even experiment, my own experience, excuse me. But, and then, studying PTSD and which when you study PTSD, TBI usually is associated in there as well sometimes because it's one of those things.
Yes. One of the big things that we really advocate for at this point is, like I said before, is the holistic approach to it and what is going on in the body, mind, and spirit, at the time too. So what we need to do, and there's so much data out there, right? You could spend your entire lifetime, researching one specific ailment, whether it's post-traumatic stress or it's TBI or hyperbaric therapies, whatever it is, there is a plethora of data out there. So my question and Christian's question is, how do we connect those dots? What is the best 360-degree approach to this where we get the most out of it, right? And we've had Doc G on our show several times. We love having just really powerful people in the field. And there's always a question. Well, this therapy, I don't know how it affects this therapy and what these two therapies could do. And we came up with this whiteboard session where we're like, let's meet and say, here's all of the most trendy, most effective therapies out there and put them in an order that works, right? And we came to this conclusion. Traumatic brain injury needs to be addressed first and foremost. Why? Because if you have improper function of the mind, of the brain, and it's not working, how are all these other therapies going to really get the most out of it, right? We talk about neuroplasticity with implementing physical or psychedelic therapies here. Well, if the brain is not functioning properly, is that neuroplasticity really getting the most out of it? Are we really getting those neurons to fire correctly? So that's a big thing that we do as well is let's take several, in our opinion too, we talked about this too, is okay, let's repair the mind. Let's get the TBI and those kind of symptoms out of it, and then address it from a fundamental base of who your human core is, right? Cognitive behavioral therapy, right? And they have CBT M now, which is the implementation of mindfulness within that. So it teaches you proper breathing. Now that's the world that I'm in now. Yeah. Exactly. So and it's so beneficial to take that mindfulness element, understanding who you are, what your childhood traumas are, all these other things that make up the chemistry of you, and then giving you the tools through mindfulness techniques on how to go through those hard moments while you're doing psychedelic therapies as well. Mm-hmm. So everybody in the professional sense, everybody's the professional, the subject matter expert. And at the end of the day, you are in a specific field. But let's start putting the fields together.
Yeah, it's funny. So to go back on the TBI thing, it's in the military as a drill sergeant, when you get these new knuckleheads to try and, if we're trying to zero their rifle, we have to get a good grouping first. And if you don't get a good grouping, you can't zero the motherfucker, right? And that's the same as the brain. If you can't get a good grouping, you can't zero it. If you can't fix the brain, it won't receive the information in a way that's healthy and appropriate. And so they'll never be able to use it. Then the other side of it is, I think the future of counseling, the future of all this wellness is not sitting across the table to a doctor and spilling your guts. I think it's the doctor saying, here's the list of things we need to get you to do, and you need to do this to yourself. Figure it out, and I'll mentor you on the path, because you got to learn how to put your fucking pants on yourself, and you got to learn how to achieve this shit on your own. And you got to know that life will continue to fucking hit you, and you're going to have to still have the tools to be able to manage those. It won't stop. But, and I really believe the mindfulness is leading us into a space where you're using different modalities of healing and then tools to manage. And then once you get to a point where you can self kind of holistically medicate, boom, then you can continue to manage life as it hits you.
Yeah, and it gets easier over time. The more often you're doing it. I've been doing it for years at this point, and when I'm done with work, I'll take 3 breaths and feel physical change in my body where that stress kind of goes away a little bit. And it just takes time of that chipping away and being able to identify that feeling, right? We've all been to the therapist who asked the question, how does that make you feel, right? and you could just keep repeating that and stuff. But there's a way to say, what were you feeling at the time? Like, what are the emotions, and where does that come from? And really start digging in, right? And asking the questions. I think that's been the uselessness on a lot of the therapists that I've used is, one, I'm pretty open, to change, criticism, whatever it is, but that's not most veterans. And when they sit across the room and this guy who's just finished his dissertation talking about his master's that's 22 years old, why am I going to open up to this man as well? Right. So what gives him the credibility for me to tell my story?
Yeah, dude. So here's my path right now because of this. In 6 months, I'll be a substance abuse counselor. And in 12 months, I'll be a clinical social worker. Well, once I gather the hours, because I'm tired of hoping someone is going to come here and help. And it's like time for me to fucking do it myself, Yeah. And now it's like I'm really excited about the process of being able to be a guy that others can call and be like, hey, I know your life. I've been there. I've done it. Let's move. Let's make it happen. You know what I mean? And I think there's a wave of veterans who are doing the same. There's a wave of veterans who are going into the holistic space, into the mental health space and the wellness space, and becoming these counselors that are like, yeah, dude, we're not going to do what you expect. We're going to do it in a different way. We're going to help you. And I'm excited for that. It's something I haven't been excited about the fucking shit in a long time. And now I am excited about this specific thing. Cause like, fuck, man, instead of complaining about why the fuck hasn't things changed, like we're starting to make the change, and this was motivated by another Ranger, Carl Monger, who runs Gallant Few, who put me on like, have you ever thought about being a counselor? I'm like, fuck no. And now I'm like, all right, fine.
Yeah. Somebody's got to do it. Why not you?
Yeah, man. Well, dude, let me ask, man, before we have to wrap anything up, you guys got plenty of time. Don't worry about it. But like, what's the future for your company and for the nonprofit? I'd love to hear what you guys have in store. And I know you have some exciting DoD news. If you want to share, you're more than welcome to.
So future is exciting for us, right? I think one of the best parts of being an entrepreneur or business owner is every day is a different challenge. And I don't think that we get enough of that as human beings, right? And we got kind of just skate through life sometimes where nothing new is happening. So we are always solving a different problem every day, which keeps us on our toes. It keeps us fresh. It keeps us exposed to new experiences. So that's the way we look at everything. When we have some downtime, Christian and I will sit down and we'll be like, okay, what do we improve here? We're like, where does this go? And all of a sudden, when you open yourself to that environment, you're getting exposed to different things. So, we're very different in that Terra Arma has several things that we're involved in, whether it's retail, direct to government, working with other organizations and nonprofits, or our online store as well. So we get these kind of 4 pillars where we get to move around and essentially have like 4 businesses within it. So
that's cool.
So with us, our big focal point has been launching within the military, is kind of being born out of the military. We're a military brand. We have military solutions. Why not take care of our service members or active duty first and foremost? So we launched into 126 locations across the Army, Air Force, Navy, and Marine Corps on all the bases around the world. So we do that while coming up with other solutions for the government, where they'll say, hey, listen, the combat uniform is just antiquated and outdated. What do we do here? So we have a designing team where we'll sit down and with the operator in mind, come up with these solutions and stuff like that. So, our priority right now is to make sure that our soldiers, airmen, Marines, whatever it is, are issued the right gear for the right environments. So that's on the Terra Arma side, and then our Ascend Together initiative really is just it's a community engagement element, and we have, where we see that going to is it was very focused on the military, but in 2025 we're going to see different things where we start incorporating other civilian elements to it, where we could educate the public as a team, right? We're all a team here in this country, and what we need to do is get on the same page. One of the beautiful things that we've realized about this show is we have a lot of listeners who are never in the military, but it helps them understand those capacities. We had one of my favorite outreaches we had a few months ago said, hey, I didn't understand my husband. When he came back, I didn't know what to do. So I started watching your podcast, and it helps me understand where he's coming from and what he's going through. So like, that's really important. And that's what we do through the Ascend Together initiative. We have monthly hikes and monthly workouts. You're going to see those grow, different chapters across the country, where everyone is invited. It's just about that community element to it. So that's something that we're really excited and passionate about.
Awesome.
And some places you can find us later this year too. We'll be co-sponsoring Best Ranger competition this year. So
I'm going to try and go to that.
Yeah,
please do. Come on out, dude. I mean, you're a Ranger. You got to be there.
Yeah, I should.
Yeah, you should be there. Yeah. So we'll be at Best Ranger competition, co-sponsoring that this year with the National Ranger Association. So we'll be there with all the competitors wearing Terra Arma gear, which is pretty cool to see.
Very cool.
We'll be at a majority of the conventions and stuff this year. We're also a founding partner with MCon, or Military Convention. It's hosted in Las Vegas. That's the fall time around. I think it's late October this year.
Yeah, I spoke there once.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll be there. Yeah. But trying to stay involved in the community, continually growing the community, and we're trying to set kind of a new standard. I think the GWAT veteran business era has kind of it's kind of crested downwards. A lot of the businesses that were around the last 10 years have dissolved. I think that a lot of that mindset has kind of left. So we're trying to kick up a new era, I think, within the veteran community, within the business, the entrepreneurial veteran community. Trying to set them a new standard by coming together and trying to give back as much as possible, to support the right people, and to stop putting up walls.
Yes.
It shouldn't be cliquey anymore. It should be, we're all under one roof, under one flag.
Yeah, I think I was a part of that early GWAT business stuff. We were all about the shock value and generating attention through social media, but we had no back end knowledge, no real business. We had to build that. We had to learn that, and through growing pains. Companies lost, companies gained. Who knows? It's been crazy, but I love seeing what you guys are doing, and I love that. So that is something that super proud to hear that you guys are doing. That is just all about giving back. It's more give than it is take, and that feels good. You know what I mean? And I think that's where you guys are always going to be more successful. I highly believe in the long game. I highly believe in the slow burn, because I think it's done right. I think when people skip steps because they're trying to get too big too fast, you burn bridges, you destroy things. You're just not thinking with your heart. And I think you guys are. And I really believe leading from the front with your heart is the most important thing that we need to do. And hands down, everything you guys have talked about sounds like that's what you're doing. And so I'm proud of you too. I'm glad I got to have you on the podcast. And I'm sure we're going to work together more in the future.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, brother. Thanks for having us on. We really enjoyed our conversation a couple weeks back. And that's what it's all about, is staying connected and pushing the needle forward for those who are learning and have learned, and maybe they're struggling with an obstacle. So thanks for giving us that opportunity to share a little bit about ourselves.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it.
All right, guys. You guys have a good day. Thank you so much.